If you've been waiting your whole life for Hollywood to make a movie about that time you fell in love with the adult film star next door, then have we got the movie for you. Welcome back to Nonstop Recap. Today we'll be going over the 2004 teen romantic comedy, The Girl Next Door. After an opening montage of several high schoolers getting their yearbook photos taken and recalling their fondest high school memories, we meet class president Matthew Kidman, who sadly has no stories of his own to tell. Matthew heads to a school assembly where he announces that the class has raised enough money to help genius Cambodian student Somnong complete his studies in the US. Matthew later suggests to his friends Eli and Klitz that they ditch class with the popular kids, but his friends turn him down. He attempts to strike out on his own, but his fear of getting caught by the school security guard prevents him from leaving the parking lot. Matthew later gets home from school and sees a car next door with boxes in the back. Inside, he finds his parents entertaining their friends Mr. and Mrs. Peterson. Mr. Peterson asks about Matthew's college plans, and he explains that his family can't afford tuition unless he earns a competitive scholarship with a winning speech about moral fiber. As he later works on his speech, he learns that the car outside belongs to his stunning new neighbor, Danielle. Matthew calls Eli to tell him about her while Eli watches dirty videos, a detail that will importantly resurface quite soon. Matthew then hangs up on Eli when he sees Danielle slowly undressing through the window, but she catches him and marches over to speak with his parents. When they call him downstairs, he learns that she's merely come over to introduce herself, and they encourage him to show his new neighbor around town. Danielle drives Matthew down the street and tells him that since he watched her strip, it's only fair if she gets to watch him in return. She makes him undress in front of the car only to steal his briefs as she speeds off. Matthew starts to run home wearing nothing but a stolen inner tube when Danielle mercifully pulls up and lets him back in the car. She takes him to a diner where she draws him a picture and tells him that she just quit her job. She then asks Matthew about his own life and quickly infers that he doesn't really have one. Her advice is to find a girl who will help him be more adventurous. The next day at school, Matthew sees Danielle outside of his classroom beckoning him to come with her. He skips class and they drive past the security guard without issue thanks to a sultry look from Danielle. While Klitz is stuck taking a pop quiz, Matthew and Danielle listen to music together at home until she decides it's time to drag him on another adventure. She brings him to a seemingly empty house where she runs into the backyard and starts undressing by the pool. Matthew joins her in the water and they nearly kiss when the homeowner returns, and Matthew recognizes the owner as his school's principal, Salinger. He and Danielle barely escape without getting caught. Klitz uncomfortably watches adult movies with Eli when they're interrupted by a sopping wet Danielle so that she and Matthew can invite them out. They arrive at a party where a jock named Hunter makes a move on Danielle while his buddy Derek pulls Matthew aside and tells him that the party's full. But a suddenly brave Matthew refuses to leave and interrupts Hunter to passionately make out with Danielle in front of everyone. Matthew returns to school with new swagger when Eli excitedly runs up and pulls him to the audio-visual room, where he shows Matthew an adult video starring Danielle under the pseudonym Athena. Matthew jealously storms out, unsure if he wants to see Danielle anymore. He gets home to find Danielle looking at photo albums with his mom, but he can't stop picturing Danielle performing erotic acts on his father and mother. After a verbal outburst, he heads upstairs to his room. But a few hot fantasies later, he decides not to call things off and agrees to go out with her that night. On their date, Matthew follows bad advice from Eli to treat her like a jerk and takes her straight to a motel. She agrees to get a room with him, and they go upstairs where she lies seductively on the bed before starting to undress. When Matthew realizes the hidden aggression behind her behavior, she confronts him for treating her like a cheap escort and storms off. After a lot of guilty reflection, Matthew decides to apologize to Danielle and ask for things to go back to normal. However, a rough-looking man named Kelly is over, and Danielle asks Matthew to leave. But Kelly follows Matthew outside and invites him to a strip club where Matthew learns that Kelly is Danielle's former producer and ex-lover. Matthew tries to prove he can be adventurous by drinking and smoking cigars with Kelly, but Danielle gets uncomfortable and steps away. She, unlike Matthew, realizes that Kelly is not a friend. When Matthew spots Mr. Peterson, Kelly calls him over and suggests they get lap dances together, which turns into an awkward experience for both of them. At school, the students watch a terrible adult education video on teenage pregnancy, after which Matthew finds Kelly on campus scouting his female classmates for future videos. Kelly then takes Matthew to the bank to meet with bank teller Jeannie about the Somnong Fund. Matthew later finds Danielle packing up her car with Kelly and learns that they're headed for an adult film convention in Las Vegas. Danielle is returning to work, feeling herself unfit for a better life. Matthew mopes about losing her to adult stardom, but quickly decides to recruit his friends for a road trip to Vegas so he can win her back. They arrive at the convention where a man named Steele mistakes Eli for an undercover journalist, until Eli explains that he's in high school. Matthew approaches Danielle and tries to speak with her, but she walks away and they run into Kelly's rival producer, Hugo. After Kelly shows up and chases Hugo away, Matthew tells Kelly that Danielle shouldn't be at the convention. But Kelly pulls Matthew into a storage room where he assaults him and tells him to stop messing with his business. Matthew finds Eli and Klitz and warns them to run if there's any trouble. After he leaves them to find Danielle, they pretend to be directors in order to impress an aspiring actress. Her hulked-out boyfriend Mule shows up and offers to let them sleep with his girlfriend if they cast her, encouraging Klitz to feel her up. Unfortunately, Steele walks in and reveals that the boys are merely high school students, causing them to flee as an angry Mule gives chase. After they find Matthew and tell him that it's time to leave, Matthew interrupts Danielle and Kelly in the middle of a business deal. He tells her that she's too good for this career, giving her the drawing that she made in the diner. Matthew returns home and Danielle shows up in the morning to drive him to school. After she reveals that she's again left the adult film industry, Matthew asks her to be his prom date. Matthew later studies his scholarship speech in class when Kelly barges in and pulls Matthew out of school. He's lost 30 grand over Danielle's violation of their contract, and he expects Matthew to help him get it back. After some debate, he beats Matthew in the face but apologizes and gives him pills to ease the pain. He says he'll leave Matthew and Danielle alone if Matthew does him a favor. Kelly walks Matthew to Hugo's house and asks for help stealing his adult film award. They break in together, but Kelly leaves behind Matthew's back and rats him out to the police. Matthew manages to steal the award, but Hugo pulls a Jafar and sends his pet parrot after him. Matthew barely makes it out without being caught by the cops and calls his friends for help. After they pick him up, he starts to act strangely euphoric. They pick up Danielle and she helps Matthew dress for his scholarship dinner while revealing that the pills Kelly gave Matthew were most likely ecstasy. At the dinner, Matthew kisses one of his scholarship competitors before flamboyantly dancing in the middle of the room. When it's time to make his speech, he ditches his cue cards and delivers an off-the-cuff sermon in which he states that moral fiber isn't about predetermined societal ethics, but simply fighting for what you care about most. This might seem like the perfect spot for a happy ending, but we've got a long way to go. Matthew loses the scholarship to another student, then goes to the bank and learns that Kelly has cleared out the Somnong account. Jeannie, embarrassed that Kelly got one over on her, threatens to sell Matthew out to the police if he doesn't get the money back. Matthew heads to Danielle's and they hatch a plan to get the money back before heading to the airport to pick up two of her former co-stars, April and Ferrari. 3 guesses what Matthew's plan involves. Matthew returns Hugo's award and secures a deal for Hugo to pay off the Somnong account in return return for a movie. Matthew later arrives at Danielle's with his friends and a camera crew in tow to pick her up for prom. They head to prom with April and Ferrari masquerading as Eli and Klitz's dates. As Eli and Klitz sneak off with April, Ferrari, and the camera crew, Hunter approaches Matthew and Danielle. He recognizes April and Ferrari from their films, and Matthew asks Hunter and his friends if they'd like to be in a movie. He has them sign release forms, but drops one on the stairwell. When they arrive downstairs, Matthew stops Derek and tells him that the party's full. Klitz then allows the others into a room that Eli has decked out to look like an adult film set. Matthew and Danielle head back upstairs to share a romantic dance while Eli and Klitz run a hectic film shoot. A teacher confronts Matthew about the dropped release form, but that's not Matthew's biggest problem. As Matthew is pulled downstairs, it's revealed that Eli tried to use Derek in the video, but Derek couldn't get it up. And they need this scene to secure Hugo's funding. Matthew agrees to do the scene himself, but stops when he sees Danielle's lipstick on his hand and starts to feel guilty. Klitz agrees to man up and step in. After pulling off the shoot, they leave prom and celebrate their success in the limo. Matthew and Danielle then drop off their friends before making love in the back seat. In the morning, Eli calls Matthew to tell him he can't find the tape, and Matthew soon finds Kelly in his dining room with his parents and Principal Salinger. He sees that Kelly has the tape, and Kelly asks for a moment alone with Matthew. Kelly threatens to show Matthew's parents the tape, but Matthew dares him to go ahead and do it. When Kelly plays the tape, it's revealed to be an adult education video on the proper use of protection. Rather than punish Matthew, Principal Salinger reluctantly agrees that his video is better than the one currently shown in schools. As we wrap things up, the students receive their yearbooks while Matthew reflects on the new stories he has to tell. Matthew's video makes Hugo a ton of money, and he sends Kelly a box of cigars as an act of goodwill. Somnong is able to study in the US, Eli becomes a filmmaker, and Klitz's role in the video reveals him to be supremely well endowed. Meanwhile, the money from the video sales pays for Matthew's tuition. But above all other adventures and happy endings he's experienced, Matthew reflects that he'll first and foremost always remember the girl next door. Thanks for watching Nonstop Recap.